This meeting is being recorded. I'd like to call to order the annual meeting of the Tuxedo Local Development Corporation at 12:33 p.m. Thursday, March 9th. If you would please join me, rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Okay, like I said, this is the annual meeting. We have our agenda, mostly the annual review and approval of various reports, appointment of committee members, election of officers, and the like. So, Julie, if there's no problem, I'd just like to run down the list real quick. The approval of minutes from February 15th, 2023. I assume all board members have reviewed them. Sorry?
They're from 2022, July.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yes. No, February 15th,
Oh.
2023.
No,
No, our last meeting. That is correct.
Oh, I thought those were the annual minutes.
No, just from the last meeting.
Oh, okay.
I reviewed them, no comment, except that upcoming meetings, it is correct in the minutes that we said Thursday, March 9th at 1 o'clock, but subsequently changed it to 12:30, and that's what was announced publicly. So the minutes are correct, but obviously we changed the meeting time up a half an hour. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from February 15th, 2023. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John Bagno. Any open to discussion, any edits or additions? No? All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Please note that, first of all members are here except for Greg Goucher. I haven't seen him on our meeting, so please note the attendance of all board members except for Mr. Goucher. So the minutes have been accepted. So on this annual review and approval, I know a lot of these policies have not changed. Rachel, can you just verify that?
That's
Which
correct.
one?
No changes.
So can we accept all of these in one motion? Are there any you would recommend us reviewing?
We should review your annual report and your mission statement and performance measures, but from disposition of property guidelines to investment policy, we can do that in one motion. There are no changes to any of those documents.
Okay, I'll make that motion that the board accept the disposition of property guidelines, compensation reimbursement and attendance policy, code of ethics, whistleblower policy, defense and indemnification policy, travel policy, procurement policy, and investment policy. Do I have a second on that, please?
Second.
Seconded by Michelle Lindsay. Any comment or questions from any board members?
No. Didn't you want to check with Rachel on the compensation part, the stipend part?
Well, the policy is straight. I'm just the mechanics of when I could discuss with her later. But thank you for that, John. So as far as the policy goes, no further questions on those points? Okay, I'll make a motion to accept. Do I have a second? I think you already did that, right, Michelle? Okay, take a vote. All in favor of accepting those?
Aye.
Aye. Note that it was unanimous with the exception of Greg Goucher. Okay, so the annual report and the mission statement. I don't know, can Rachel or Julie walk us through that? I don't have those printed in front of me, and I don't know if we want to put it up on the screen or how
We
do
can
you
go
see fit?
through it. We can go through it. Julie, do you mind if I put you on the spot to do that?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, good.
I can share my screen. However, it says the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, let me see how I could.
Go to participants. I believe you do that, and then click on her. Oh. we make co-host? Right here.
I mean, if not, I can just talk you through it.
Oops, I hit the wrong, oops.
Oh, there you go. Now you're co-host.
You're co-host now, right?
Yep.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so do you see the operations and accomplishments on your screen?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so this is required under Public Authorities Accountability Act. And each year, the agency or the authority needs to review what it's done and give a summary report. It also states what the agency's mission is. So we talk about the corporation was founded and established to provide facade improvements grants within the community. And we talk about the board members, how many meetings were held during the year, the officers that were elected, and then any specific accomplishments that were noteworthy. So I think for 2021, completing a fiscal audit and getting the board into compliance with public authorities reporting was certainly a key accomplishment. And the fact that the Hamlet revitalization grant guidelines and the applications were developed so that we could hit the ground running in 2023 to invite applications and then disperse funds. And then we talk about the committee members that were appointed. And we originally had a business and finance committee and a community aesthetics and tourism committee. That was noted a while ago, and I just took that out and said that those appointments were not made to those committees. So it's pretty straightforward. It's, short and sweet, and it fulfills the public authorities requirements. And then the other document is the mission statement and measurement report. And in this instance, we state the year that the authority or the corporation was established and that we're reporting for last year from January to December. Again, stating the mission statement of the agency, and then notable performance goals that were achieved during the year. And again, it kind of reiterates what we've already said in the annual report as far as establishing the grant guidelines and the application and bringing the corporation into compliance. So I don't know if you had a chance to read this previously, if you have comments or questions.
I noticed on the committees, it's myself, Ken, and Michelle. Shouldn't we have Irene on one of the committees also?
This was the last time.
Oh, that's the last
So
We're gonna be taking that
that's
action.
another action item.
But yeah, it'll be based on that. So no, I don't have any
No.
comments or changes. No, thank you. So I guess we could just vote on accepting those two reports?
Yes, you can.
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that the board accept the 2022 annual report and the 2022 mission statement and performance measures. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John Banyo. And I think we said no further discussion, right? Okay, all in favor of accepting those?
Aye.
Aye. Make a note, it's unanimous. I know we have Andrew here to review the audit report for 2022. I'd suggest that we go back and do that right away so he doesn't have to hang around. He might use that fly swatter on us, and I don't want that to happen.
We got a lot of flies around here.
All right, well, we got
All right, so
some pesky to see.
you all should have gotten the electronic version of the audit report.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
We sent that out. So pretty briefly, I mean, obviously there's not a lot of activity going on right now for the corporation, but you'll see this year, because you did do the audit first time last year, you have at least comparative statements, so you can see side by side from year to year. The big
Can I
difference.
interrupt you 1 second, Andrew?
Sure.
Julie, can you bring that up, please, on the screen? So I do have 2 printed copies here, but if Andrew refers to anything that he wants
Sure.
everybody to see.
Yep, I
Thank
can
you.
do that.
Please go ahead, Andrew. Sorry for the
Okay,
interruption.
so I was just going to say, when you look at on pages 6 and 7, the balance sheet and the profit and loss, you'll see that it's comparative this year. So at least, it's always more useful to look at comparative statements. Again, not that there's a lot of activity for the LDC. The main difference was the $100,000 grant that you got that was triggered by the approval of the special permit. So you did get that grant money in November of 22. So that shows up on your profit and loss this year. And the other activity is pretty similar to last year. It's just the your administrative costs, professional fees, insurance. Your professional fees obviously went up because it was the first year you had to pay an audit fee. You paid that in 2021 audit, you paid it for 2022. So that had to do with some of the increase in your professional fees.
I'd like to interject something, Andrew.
Sure.
That I want to make sure that the board understands. That's why we're in the business of making grants here, just to keep this board operational. We're looking at approaching $30,000 in fees.
Right.
So it behooves this board to take action this year. Thank you, Andrew.
Absolutely.
Yes. You also did receive, there was a couple of years ago, there was a problem with an audit fee being paid between Tuxedo Farms and Tuxedo. The wrong agency paid it. That was taken care of. The $4,500 was returned back to Tuxedo Local Development Corp., which had inadvertently paid that in the previous year. So that's all been straightened out. So really the major items with the audit, you'll see in the notes, I did mention about the new, in note 3 to the audit report, it mentions about the special permit getting approved and what that triggered, getting rid of the loan fund and adding an additional $100,000 onto the grant fund. In terms of the findings, now we can still give a clean opinion even though we have internal control issues because of the small amount of activity. So we can substantively test all of your transactions to support. So we can find the support for the grant, and for all the expenses, we can look at the invoices and be able to give a clean opinion on it. However, as a government audit, we still have to look at your internal controls and compliance. So regardless of whether we're still able to give an opinion, we have to make those comments on whether you have controls in place. So that's why I know I was talking to Ken, sometimes you may look at that and say, geez, we only had 5 transactions or whatever, but the point is you have to have those controls in place. So in the back of the audit report where the 3 findings are, I will point out there was 4 last year. There was a compliance issue with the Paris reporting, but the LDC did file its Paris report, so I did remove that comment. You now are in compliance with your filings as required. So the only 3 comments still have to do with your internal controls. So certainly the bank statements, there should be somebody looking at the bank statements other than Ken, just comparing it to the check register, make sure the balances, and then just sign off on it. I mentioned to Ken, it's very simple. If Ken's the only one looking at them, nobody else knows. If he writes a check, nobody else knows that it was written. So every month, it just, takes a couple of minutes because of the activity you have. Once a month, someone should look at that bank statement, look what's in the register, look to make sure there's nothing unusual on it. There's not a lot of transactions, so it shouldn't take long. And then just initial the corner so that someone other than Ken is looking at that bank statement. Okay.
So Andrew, the only exception, the board has authorized for the recurring administration fees, which include insurance, auditing fees, attorneys, that I've been authorized to execute those payments. But as a backup also, as those transactions are happening, I will send out emails that show the voucher and the payment. And, right.
And if you do a prepay, a prepay for a board meeting, that still needs to show up at the next board meeting. There should be, most municipalities, Ken, how the town does it with an abstract. Obviously, an abstract would be very small for Tuxedo. Just at the board meeting, it should be a printout. These are the checks that were written. These are the expenses, and the board should approve it. Normally that should be done before, but if you are doing prepays, there's still the requirement at the next board meeting, the board has to approve those expenses. So you should put together an abstract at the board meeting and make sure they approve it. And this is going to become more important, obviously, as you're doing grants now. Because now if you're doing grants and you're paying a $70,000 grant for someone, that really should be something that goes through the process. All the proper approvals are there. We see that the board was involved in it, in looking at the requirements and signing off on that grant before any large checks are being written. So really
that approval will actually happen at a board meeting. We would never proceed with an approval of one. So that would have to happen at a board meeting that we would vote to approve.
Right. And that, like I said, that's something that will be taken care of, that if you're approving before. I just want to point out the other ones, if you're going to, pay them, make sure at some point, every check that gets written should show up to the board that they should be approving it. So there should be a list of every check that's written. So, obviously some months there may be none, and then some months there may be one or two. So it's a simple document, and the board just says we reviewed it and we approve all the disbursements.
Totally understood. There's really, as I can see, only two scenarios. The prepaid or the annual expenses that are all predictable, and then any of the grants we approve, again, would only happen at a board meeting where we take a vote. So I think we got both of those covered.
Right. So again, that and the bank statement is really the important thing. Someone should be looking at that bank statement every month and initialing it. So when we come into an audit, we can look at your bank statements and see whoever it was initialed in the corner. We know you're looking at it, Ken. You're the one writing the checks and all that. There should be that second person that you can have an audit trail showing that someone else reviewed that. And Ken, that's why we always tell people in our audits, that's also for your protection, to have someone else looking at that bank statement. So down the line, someone doesn't come back and think, well, what did you do? You're the only one looking at that bank statement, writing checks. It's always good to have more than one person. Segregation of duties is the best thing in any kind of, financial office. So if you can do that, that would be great.
Understood, and we will comply,
Right.
absolutely.
And the other thing that is the accounting program. Now, again, for the amount of transactions you have, perhaps you're not going to go out and get a QuickBooks and post your transactions, but there should be some summary of your activity, even if it's just an Excel spreadsheet. So you can give a report to the board saying, so far through July, we have this much cash. We have, X month in legal fees, X in insurance expenses, sort of like a profit and loss. So the board can see sort of a summary of the activity rather than just a check register. And again, it could be like the old One Write Plus sheets. When you put it on an Excel spreadsheet, you write a check, you sort of, you carry it over to a column, whether it's professional fees, insurance, audit fee, and then you total the columns at the bottom. It could be something that simple because you don't have a lot of transactions. So I don't know if it's necessary for you to be, getting a QuickBooks and processing everything through a QuickBooks for what you do. But there should be some kind of a putting the numbers together into a financial statement format for the board to look at.
Well, we're certainly running a check register, and we'll double down with the Excel spreadsheet documenting as you just laid out.
Right, just carry it out in the columns, and the check register can show what the cash balances are. And I also noticed there wasn't a check register for the other account, the money markers. There should be a check register for that. I only have the check register for the one, but I looked through all the bank statements, so I saw the transactions, and there's not much from that one, obviously. But you should have a check register for both accounts.
Understood. That's
Okay.
easily accomplished, and we'll be done.
What are the two accounts?
One's a money market, and one's a checking account.
Oh,
And the money market really just had the transfer in and usually just transfers money over and gets interest. So it doesn't really have much activity in it during the year. But again, all accounts should be accounted for with some kind of a general ledger. So again, overall, if you can just put some of those controls in place, again, some of them are fairly simple controls to put in place, and you can get yourself a clean, no internal control or findings in the future. But otherwise, again, because we were able to confirm all the transactions, you still get, an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. So if anybody has any questions?
Board members, any questions?
I do actually do. When I was emailed you asking about the second person, you were saying it's usually the treasurer.
Yeah, it could be the treasurer. Basically, it should be someone else in the organization. It doesn't have to be. You have a very small organization. You don't have a business office. Lots of times in a business office, it can be, the secretary to the supervisor could do it, something like that. You don't really have that. So in your case, once a month, if you're there, for the town board meeting, just look at the bank statements, look at it probably shouldn't take you any more than 5 minutes to do. And you would be the ideal second person to look at it.
Any further questions?
No.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to accept the Tuxedo Local Development Corporation financial statements through December 31st, 2022, as submitted by Cooper Arias. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by, I'll get Irene DeNaro in here.
Okay, second.
Thank you, Irene. Any further discussion?
No.
No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Greg has
Aye.
joined.
Oh, Greg, how are you, sir?
Sorry, I was a little late, but
Always welcome. You could read the minutes. We'll share them with you.
Yeah.
We just authorized approval of the financial statement,
Yep,
and
I saw that.
nothing
Thank you.
earth-shaking there. Okay, I guess that does it for Andrew, right? Rachel and Julie? Thank you, Andrew.
All right. Anybody has any questions, you'll have my email.
Yes,
Talk
sir.
to you soon, Ken. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you
Andrew.
very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, so we did the approval of minutes, review of the audit report, we took care of, so now we're at the appointment of committee members. I'm gonna base this on what we did last year. So we have the audit and finance committee members. Last year, we had the illustrious group of Ken English, Michelle Lindsay, John Bagno, and now we have Irene Denaro and Greg Goucher. Our first question to our council is it appropriate that we, oh, so are we doing the committee first? Yes,
Yeah,
and then
and then
election
officers.
officers. So it's such a small group, Rachel, should we just have all committee members on these? All board members on these, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. I would recommend just having 3. Julie, do we ever have people put like the whole board on the committees? I don't think we do.
So 3 is fine. I had voted to reduce my name on here if possible.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you really just need the 3. There's no reason to put the whole board on. And then you get into like, well, if the whole board's on, did then the whole board approve whatever the committee did as well? So it's probably best just to have 3.
I wouldn't mind substituting my name for Irene for mine. Is that okay with the rest of the board?
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion for both the Audit and Finance Committee and Governance Committee to be comprised of Michelle Lindsay, John Bagno, and Irene Denaro for both committees. Do I have a second on that motion? Seconded by, I'll go with John Bagno. I saw his hand up.
I was pointing to it.
Oh, she's pointing to Irene. Okay, Irene, motion seconded by Irene. Any discussion, or can we just vote on that?
You can vote on that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
hi,
Okay, the committees are now determined. The officers, we have the illustrious titles of chairman, co-chairman, secretary, and treasurer. We had one question about the secretary. Julie, obviously, you've been the functioning secretary, and there was a question by board members, do you have to be on the board to be the secretary?
Typically, we have a board member be the official secretary with those duties assigned to Julie, and Julie submits the minutes on behalf of the secretary, the actual secretary of the board. So you do want someone on the board in that position officially.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
I suggest we just keep the titles the same, and then the only other option we have is either Greg or Irene as secretary. I have a feeling I know what Greg's preference would be.
Irene, I support Irene.
She's
I
raising
will-
her hand, accepting the nomination.
Just know I'm not a very good secretary.
Well, you have
Don't worry,
Julie,
Julie will take
who
care of it.
will
I'll
shoulder
make it easy.
99.99% of the duty. So I'll plug in Irene Denaro as secretary and just make a motion to accept and appoint Chairman Ken English, co-chairman John Bagno, secretary Irene Denaro, and treasurer Michelle Lindsay. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Seconded by Michelle Lindsay. Any further discussion by board members? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Hi,
That's unanimous. So we did the appointment, election of officers. Then we're at other matters.
I can take
Rachel,
this.
you want to walk us through that part of it?
Yep. Go ahead, Julie.
So I gave you the acknowledgement of fiduciary duty statement and the board evaluation forms. Both of those are required each year. So I'd ask you to fill them out. And if you want to send them back over to me, I'll keep them here in our files. And then I will also take the board evaluations and prepare a summary, which then gets sent to the state. So if you could do that, maybe within the week and get those back to me, I'd appreciate it. The other item that's noted under other matters is board member training dates. Board members are required to participate in the state authority budget office training, and that would be for new members or members that haven't already taken it. You need to do it within the first year of your appointment. So Greg, I think you would need to do that if you haven't already. And Irene, I will send you the link to the training. It's an hour to an hour and a half. It's scheduled for an hour and a half. It's an online training. You sit at your computer and you listen. There's one next week and there are 2 upcoming in April. Just need to pick one
Great.
and register as the directions say.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank
Send me
you.
a link and that'd be helpful.
Quick question about the confidential evaluation of board performance. If somebody signed it, would that be a problem, or is it required to be anonymous?
You can sign it if you would like. I mean, we keep them here and they do remain anonymous. They're not foilable.
Okay, that's good. I didn't want to waste another piece of paper and I signed mine.
That's all quite all right.
Julie, those are individual, right? So each individual board members fills out those 2 forms?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And you send those around? I apologize.
I did. And Greg, the one that I did send for the fiduciary duty statement was one that had already been completed. So I'll send you a blank copy.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
And Julie, I'll collect from the board members here present today and scan them and send them immediately after the end of this meeting.
Perfect. It is 1 o'clock now, and I would remind you that you have a public hearing scheduled at 1 o'clock. That's
Okay.
to review your new policy for video conferencing for members to participate in meetings.
Okay, so I think there's a little bit of new business that are just some questions that I wanted to go over. So I don't want to close the meeting.
No,
but I
yeah,
do
we'll
want-
leave it
I'll just open the public hearing.
Yep.
So this is the public hearing on, could you just remind me on the,
It's on the video conferencing policy, which would
Okay.
allow a quorum to be at the physical location and board members to be remote and participate, not count toward the quorum, but their vote will count.
right?
Are there any members of the public in attendance? I can't see the whole room.
No.
I don't think so.
Oh, well, that makes it easy, doesn't it?
So I'd like to open the public hearing of the Tuxedo Local Development Corporation on the topic of the video conferencing policy. Open the meeting, open the public hearing at 1:01 PM. I don't need a second on that, right? Just opening the meeting.
Just, yeah, you're fine.
Okay, seeing that there's nobody from the public here, I'll determine that any of the public who wanted to be heard has been heard, and I make a motion to close the public hearing I'll wait till 1:02, just so we could show that we didn't shoehorn this in.
Yep, and we're also in a meeting, so should anyone arrive, we're still in a meeting.
Okay, so we'll accept public comment while we're in the meeting.
Yep, but
Should
I
I
would carry.
just leave the hearing open until we close both at the
In
end?
case somebody's late.
Yeah, just leave it open and
All
we'll
right,
close. Yeah.
just keep the public hearing open.
Yep.
Very good.
I just have a question about this related to my planning board role. Does this committee, this corporation have to comply with the open meetings law per se?
Yes.
Or it does? Okay. So if anybody's remote, do they have to pre-announce where they're remote from in order to vote?
No, in order to be counted toward the quorum, we would need so remember, there are 2 tracks that you can go under the open meetings law. This track that we're approving and holding a public hearing for allows the board member to be remote in a non-public location. Their vote will count, but they will not count toward the quorum. Under the other track, to get that person to count toward a quorum, and their vote to count, so both, we would need them in a public location that has been disclosed to the public in advance of the meeting.
And so there's extraordinary circumstances that have to be met. Physical disability, illness, caregiver responsibilities, work-related obligations. So obviously Greg Boucher has work-related obligations today. And I would imagine also in evenings, caregiver responsibilities. So those are two obvious ones that make his attendance the most difficult. But those certainly can apply to any board member. And with the extraordinary circumstances, it reads, when participating under extraordinary circumstances by which a member of the public body may request participation via video conference, they must notify the corporation staff by phone or email as soon as the circumstance is presented. The staff will present the information to the chair, being me, of the board, and the administrative director for final determination. So that would just be, send me an email or a text, and I could acknowledge that I received that. And then the other one would be to count towards a quorum.
Has to be a public place.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's been notified, right?
Now, can somebody say if they're home, declare that a public space in order to qualify?
No,
It truly has
It
to
would-
be a public place, like a library or something?
yes, library, firehouse, town hall, something of that sort. It can't even be a coffee shop or a restaurant because you would have the impediment that perhaps the public thinks they would need to purchase something in order to enter the establishment. So truly public location. In order to count toward the quorum.
Yeah, still could vote, but just wouldn't count towards the quorum. That's why, in general, we should just have it in our head that 3 people need to be here present, and then we check that box.
Exactly.
Well, the other business that I wanted to bring up was the email that's been circulating about this question regarding conflict of interest. Rachel, did you get to review any of that back and forth?
I did. I do reach a different conclusion. It sounds like Howard is also reaching a different conclusion than the planning board attorney. Neither of us believe that this is a conflict. And I see no need for, I can't speak to what recommendations are at the planning board level, but at the LDC level, I do not believe that any board member would need to recuse themselves unless they're sitting in a position that is directly benefiting from the grant fund. So if a board member, to use the example that we have, was a member of the Historical Society, then yes, you would need to recuse yourself. But in these circumstances, no. In the case of John, I see no reason why John needs to recuse himself. And I believe Howard came to that same conclusion.
And he's going to discuss that, I believe, with Kelly, the planning board.
Mm-hmm. So we did, yeah. I'm happy to talk to Kelly. I know that Howard reached out directly and included me on that email. I don't believe we've not connected. But for our purposes today and going forward, no conflict by virtue of the fact that we have town board members and planning board members on the LDC board.
What I'd like to point out is the sequencing here. This board is not going to approve applications that need to be presented before the planning board. So the sequence needs to happen that anybody who's applying for LDC funds that needs to go before the planning board, of course, John as the chairperson, whether or not that applicant is granted LDC funds, That's after the fact of the approval, so, from the planning board. So, certainly John, or any planning board member, if we had somebody else other than John on this board, they couldn't do their job.
Right.
And so, and it may end up that the LDC never grants that applicant funding. So, it would be detrimental to the applicant, to the planning board. Forget that they then come to the LDC, because there's no obligation to come to the LDC before you go to the planning board, if I'm making that clear. So I think Kelly's notion about John recusing himself because he's on the LDC, as far as I'm can see, that's kind of irrelevant, because he needs to do his job as planning board, and then it comes to the LDC only really after they've approved it.
I have one question about the sequence, because I believe it said the applications have to be approvable by the planning board, not approved by the planning board prior to approval by the LDC.
I think that was really a coaching thing to show people, listen, if you can't get past the planning board, it doesn't matter where your money's coming from, you'll never get that project built. So regardless of whether you got LDC money, and we certainly don't want to discourage people from going before the planning board for a project that they wanted to get done, because they might end up just using their own money. And that's my thought about it.
But I think it should be, what is it? Is it prior approval before we can grant the funds? Or if it's just, it's in pretty good shape, but it's not approved, but it looks like it will be. So what is it?
Well, I'd be worried if we gave them money and their project couldn't be approved, how do we get it back?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, conditional, I would say you would grant it conditional upon final
I
approval.
mean, I
by
don't
the
have a
planning board.
problem with, they have to be approved before we granted it.
Oh, yeah.
So if that's
Yeah.
it, that's it.
Yeah.
But then where it said approvable, I think has to be changed. To
Yeah, because who
approved.
determines? Do we determine as an LDC board that it's approvable?
Well, it's not really.
I mean, who does?
No,
Yeah,
this board should not make the
Yeah.
judgment.
Right.
yeah,
The planning board.
The
Right.
planning board should.
yeah.
So I think
Only
it
ones
should
that
be,
could.
it should be approved then, not approvable.
Because that's the first step.
Yeah,
So-
that has to come first before this
Exactly.
board could grant.
Right,
So
so,
then
but
it
if
should
they
be
submitted an application, and gave us the $250 check, the word approvable just means, hey, look, just understand, you put $250 up, but, until you get before the planning board, we're not,
Exactly.
we wouldn't, so the word approvable is just like a note of caution for your $250, as far as I'm
But
concerned.
then it needs further explanation so that the applicants know that they have to get the approval
Approval
first. And I
first,
don't believe
exactly.
it says that.
Well,
I might be wrong.
I'll defer to our attorney. I mean, it sounds like a minor point.
It,
that we-
well, here's what I'm thinking is that if we approve a project for a grant before it's gone to the planning board and it goes to the planning board and they don't get planning board approval such that they can't pull permits or whatever they need to do, the project's not going to happen. We won't have dispersed any money. We're doing it all on a reimbursement basis, except the initial disbursement upon signing the grant agreement. That would be our exposure. And if the project doesn't go forward, remember, we put in recapture provisions. So if they don't pursue the project and we've done that initial disbursement, we're going to look to claw it back. I mean, hopefully we don't ever end up in that position. And I think that when we get into approved projects that are waiting for planning board approval that they may need to go forward, we probably want to make sure that they've gotten that approval before we even sign the grant agreement and do that initial disbursement. So we avoid that scenario entirely.
So I think the key here is, if we did give a quote-unquote approval, it would be certainly conditional to.
Contingent upon.
Contingent
Yeah.
upon, yeah,
Yeah.
contingent
Yeah.
upon. Yeah.
Right.
So we're not gonna give them any money until they get approval.
Right.
That's the
Exactly.
bottom line. So I think it's There's no way they're gonna get the money without approval.
I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
as written. It was just a matter of helping people understand, well, you approved my grant, why do I, well, just helping people understand, you know, you have to go before the planning board, whether you were getting a nickel from us or not,
Exactly.
you know?
Right.
So we're just trying to help you understand the process of getting the project moving forward.
Do we have a form that once we make a grant, that it says some of these, that it sets some of these conditions on that form so that there's no question?
We will have formal grant agreements. Julie and I have a draft that we'll share with the board once it's finalized. And it'll be the template document that we'll use for the grant agreement that'll be signed by Ken and then the grant recipient. And it'll vary deal to deal, but the basic terms we'll be able to share with you in the grant agreement.
Plus, the other thing we put in place, thanks to Rachel and Julie, is this 10-day submittal deadline before. So they're checking the applications for completeness. And they would notify the applicant and certainly mention the need to go before the planning board. So,
Yes.
so there's another guardrail there to not waste people's time.
Yep. And that was really our rationale of get the applications in plenty of time in advance. Let Julie and I do the initial review so that once they're in front of the board, we're not in a position where we're saying you need a second quote, you need to make sure you're going to planning board, these are the considerations. That'll be done by time you all are looking at the applications. And so hopefully it'll make your analysis and decision-making easier.
Makes sense.
So I think we've gotten to the point, certainly from the LDC's point of view, that John doesn't need to recuse himself. And again, I hope that by conversation between Howard, Rachel, and Kelly, that it's clear that no one from the planning board would have any personal gain from any decision, and that again, the sequence needs to happen, because with the understanding that no grant would be given to an applicant until they get through the planning board anyway. So it seems to cover all of that as far as I'm concerned. Okay, because otherwise we'd be handcuffed, and I don't know what we'd be doing here. So, okay, then looking at our agenda, I don't know if we have anything else to discuss.
Just have to close the public hearing.
Okay, well, it's now 1:15, and I don't see any public having joined our meeting either virtually or in person. So I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing on the video conferencing policy. Do I have a second?
Aye.
Seconded by Irene Denaro. All in favor? Aye. Well, I guess I should have made the statement, that no one has come before the board, so all opportunity has been given to the public, so we're closing the public hearing at 1:16 PM. Thank you. If there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion to close the annual meeting of the Tuxedo Local Development Corporation, March 9, 2023, at 1:16 PM. Do I have a second?
Second.
Michelle Lindsay raised her hand enthusiastically. Meeting adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the 23rd and we'll look for applications tomorrow.
All right, so the next, let's make that announcement. The next meeting is on, can you give us the date and time again, please?
The 23rd of March.
5 o'clock.
And that's conditional that we actually have applications to review.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. So
So,
I have it for the 23rd.
As the date approaches, so I guess, quick question, do we have any applications before you that you're reviewing yet?
We've
Now,
not
I'm
seen
expecting
any.
one from Mr. Scott Lesko. I know he's communicated that he was going to present something and that he already has a quote-unquote approved project in front of the planning board, and
What about the Historical Society and Carlin? Where are those at? I mean, we have an application from them.
We have,
At least locally, I don't know if it's gotten to Julie yet.
right.
They just have to wait for your April meeting to get it approval, right?
Well, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, because you said they didn't get the GML decision hadn't come back.
Right, no, we
Okay.
haven't given them approval from the planning board, ARB perspective. But the application such as it is,
To go to them.
that could
Oh,
go to them
conditional,
to
right.
review it, and if there's any shortcomings, they would give
Right.
them time to. Is
Perfect.
that like a draft application? You guys okay with
I
that?
think they have, even in minutes from the last meeting, don't you mention that you gave them the update of what they needed to do?
Yes, and we also prepared a letter to each of the applicants and forwarded back to you, Ken, for your signature to actually go to those folks and tell them what additional information is being required to make a decision on their application.
Oh, you did send that to me? I'm sorry. If you did, it's lost in my email.
Well, I will
Fine.
resend it. I will
Thank you
gladly
very
resend it.
much. It's in
And
the
we have
199.
wiggle room. If Julie and I don't get the applications tomorrow, as long as we have them at the beginning of next week, that's fine. The key for us is getting the applications to you in a complete form. We can scramble to do that, but I would want the applications out to the board at least by the end of next week.
Right.
So if
want
we can
you
get
to
it
have
early in
time.
the week, work with the applicants and then get them out to the board by the end of next week, then we'll be in good shape for the 23rd. If that doesn't happen, we can cancel the meeting unless there's something else we need to discuss.
Okay. Well, obviously, I prematurely closed the meeting, so I'm going to make another motion so that we're in compliance. Apologies, we obviously closed the meeting a couple of minutes before we should have. I'll make a motion to close the meeting now at 1:19 PM. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded again by Michelle Lindsay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, and I'll be
Thanks,
sending you
everyone.
those scanned documents, Julie, momentarily.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Bye, everybody.